Well, good morning. Very pleased to see, obviously, some famous faces, but more important, new faces that most probably will become famous in the next couple of years. And this is the purpose of this event, to win new advocates, to join this mega undertaking that will take us most probably a couple of decades, to achieve. And the purpose of my talk is to make the point that the US has been the driving force behind the internet, and it will not be different for V6. That's why we need every one of you, to do whatever he did in the past for V4, should repeat the same thing with V6. Some of the stats to show you and to make you aware how the numbers play out. So the show now is happening in Asia as a latecomer in the internet. So almost half of the internet population worldwide is happening in Asia, while the penetration is still in the low 30s, so 23 to 25%. Yeah. But these are just fixed internet numbers. If we look at the ranking now, China has overtaken the US, and India is edging up to third place. Still, this is just the fixed internet. And the numbers are going to be rather in the mobile devices, because the internet will be largely mobile. In some countries, the penetration of mobile internet is already beyond 80%, like in Dubai and the places that can afford expensive devices. But the internet list will be like this one in the future. So the fixed internet numbers are more ITU, telecom regulator numbers that are sent over. So when you see in India 100 million numbers, that's not a real count. That's a very good guess of a regulator somewhere at the telecom regulator in New Delhi. And he passed on this information to the ITU, which passes it on to internet stats, which means that these numbers somehow are not showing the reality of how the fixed internet is. So expect that the numbers in the future are going to be like this. It will be just the rule of the numbers. The big states will have the big numbers. And the current penetration of the mobile internet is about 15%. And most probably one of the best things that Steve Jobs has done is basically kill the computer literacy needed in order to connect to the internet. So by having devices that are just shrinking laptops into a smaller laptop gives everyone on this planet the kind of courage and, if not, a challenge to use the devices to connect to the internet. Okay? But expect that 50% of the world population will never use a desktop or a laptop to connect to the internet. It will be rather through mobile devices, maximum iPad or whatever next futures are going to come on board. And this is how the internet penetration or the world population will look like in the future. So places like Europe and the US and Australia will shrink to their numbers of population that they have. So in terms of population, the bigger places in the future will be obviously China, India, and total Africa. So this is where the show is happening. And this is where also where IPv6 is having some very good uptake. Some of the numbers that shows you who is using the internet. So if you look at the top websites, 2 websites from China have made it to the top 10. This kind of websites need 200 million or $250 million users, which means these are the real traffic generators. And if you look at the US, it's quite normal that you have this kind of model, which is primarily the Western model. So you've got Google, Facebook, Yahoo, and so on, those that attract just normal crowd. Not that much of business is done through this. And in some other places like Australia, we have seen that the top 20 websites are primarily banks. So the banks have taken a strong confidence into the internet to use it to push the internet. So you have from different places. What's interesting is that Asia, India, China, India, and so on are using the internet for bank transactions, for eBay and Amazon and so on and so forth. So they are more, because of the distance, and it's more convenient to access these business websites. So in terms of Google.com, the 30% is practically, you can say that the US, with its internet population, generates 30% of the world internet traffic, which is massive. And next to it is obviously India, because they are English literate. And the surprise is China, despite the fact that Baidu, which is the search engine in China, is, after all, using Google for this. And it's directly from Google.cn as such, or Google.com, which means that people are bookmarking directly Google.com in order to access Google. So here you don't notice that difference because you just go on Google, you get automatically .com. Around the world, it's always the national DNS which shows up. And if you want to have always .com, you have to either bookmark it or you put it as your startup thing. Yeah, so it needs a bit of a thinking in order to do that. On this website, on Facebook, which country is missing? Not those that attend my last talks, obviously. So, no offense to any country, but one is missing. Right, okay. That's quite a missing thing. But Yahoo is one of the most used worldwide because of its email, especially the local version of email that they have introduced before anyone else. So you can find it in Indian, Chinese, and Arabic, and so on and so forth. That's why it's fairly familiar. And this localization is what makes the internet today quite popular, because about 35% of the internet today is English, but the rest is not English. So English is becoming a minority language, which is good for the internet, because that's the mirror of the world population that is using the internet. So you will find the same thing for YouTube. China is missing. And one little impact, what social networking can do, it creates communication between people on a kind of privacy basis, which even can topple governments. And I think that's good as well. No? So as I said, the US is doing business with the internet, which shows a certain maturity and mentality maturity between the users, so they are gone beyond just. Twitter is an example to show you how some nations can adopt new technologies faster than others. So this is it shows a certain ease of adoption of new technologies a lot faster than in other places. And in some other places, it's even censored. So it shows like governments like China is highly intelligent to even stop brand new technologies, which means that it's only a question of time until these things are going to be taken out. Okay? In terms of censorship on the internet, yeah, there is censorship everywhere, either for good or for bad things. But some places are not censored at all. You can imagine when you see the white spots, because there is no censorship, and then the Tunisian stepped in and stopped it, while in Egypt they don't even know how to do it. That's why people could talk to each other quite well. The only thing you could do is put switch off on mobile devices as well as on the internet, which even enrage people that have been using the internet. Okay? So I guess you know this slide. In between, we have a little black problem called the internet. So NAT has been used to extend the internet lifespan, but it's not really an innovation technology. It's just telecom internet technology. And I don't think that's the model that will scale the way we think it should be done. So we have this exhausting debate we had for the last 10 years, which is basically reducing V6 to V4 at an addressing level. And that is, I would call it a blissful ignorance of a lot of people, unfortunately. And the press is also not doing a very good job in this area because they don't dig deep. So from a recent speaker, Nicholas Fischbach, who is deploying IPv6 in a native at Colt, has said that IPv6 networking is totally different from IPv4 networking. It's a whole new world. Okay, so don't adopt v6 the same way like IPv4. That would not scale the same way. Some people are trying even to dynamize the IPv6 address and what have you, to make money out of between the dynamized and the stateful address. So there is a bit of education to be done in this area. Since the address space ran out of even people knowing it, so everyone is ramping up, which most probably is the only way to get people to wake up, because we've seen quite a bit of take-up as recently. So the US has the largest v4 address space, so 1.5 billion, which is almost half of the address space. It doesn't mean that every American has an IP address. This is a wrong perception. Just few have address space, but not everyone. So if you take those that have the bigger blocks and you keep the rest, you would say that the US has the same problem like Europe or even Asia as such. But it's good to have enough v4 address space. You'll be able to do a dual stack transition, because that's the only way of keeping a kind of parity between the technical transfer. But more important is the business parity, that you can do the same business you do today with v4, you can do it with v6. And so if you're doing advertising based on location and based on the IP address, you want to do the same thing with IPv6. Because the whole model, the billions or trillions of dollars that we make out of the internet has to be sustained the same way. So that's very important. And you'll be able to do that only with dual stacking. So that's the first good news for you. Although if John Curran is around, he will tell you, well, we don't have enough v4 address space left. So my case must probably not be sustainable, because the guys that have v4 address space, they will keep it for themselves, thinking they might sell it or might have certain monopoly on the current v4 internet, because it's the rich internet, and anyone that's going to move to v6 is rather the poor internet. These kind of speculations are out there. Huh? The next good news I have for you is that despite the lax way of the US looking for the business case for the US, it is still the #1 prefix place in the world, although the visible v6 prefixes is not matching the allocation of the IPv6 addresses. But I think it's good news, because that sends a strong signal to the entire world that v6 is important to the US. And since it is the internet model, it will help the other guys, the reluctant people, especially the ISPs around the world, to say, well, if the US is taking v6 seriously, then I think we should take it seriously as well. This is a very important message. And this ramp up has happened only since the address depletion that happened back in February. So we had about 2,000 prefixes that were by that time. Then all of a sudden we went up to 9,000 prefixes, which is almost 40% of the prefixes that needs to be allocated worldwide. So we need about 20,000 prefixes in order to have all the ISPs that are members of the registries in order to have full coverage. But if you have already 40%, which means that the community that we have been pushing v6 have done a very good job in the last 10 years in order to make this happen. So the next thing to do is to show them through the examples that are going to be discussed yesterday and the next 2 days, what are the new features and new business exploitable items that are going to be done through v6 in order to convert these visible prefixes into v6 service. So the v6 service today is around 15%. So from the US, you have 928. So you would expect 10 to 15% to offer v6 service in the US. The kinds of Verizon on LTE and the likes. It's more of the smaller ISPs that see this as a kind of market advantage or differentiation in order to show up in this place. So in terms of progression in some of the infrastructure things, So you've got something like 84% of TLDs support already IPv6, which is quite very good. Although the enabling of Quad A on the website is still low, so the majority that have enabled it have done it because of some political reasons or in order to take leadership. So you have about 2.5%. So normally, through our work, if we get some 10% penetration in the websites, then V6 will do the rest by itself. But the good news is that the ASs that have adopted V6 are already beyond 12% today, which is a very good start, because most of the time it's the leaders that do that. Huh? And the other good thing is the V6 performance. So obviously, not too many people are using V6, so there is more access through V6. So from all the tests that have been done, 74% of the connections using V6 are the same as V4 or better. And this is obviously when you don't have to go through NATs. So there is a bit of end-to-end access. And I guess maybe in 20 years we'll not have NAT. Then you will be able to do end-to-end connections. Huh? One new thing that we have discovered is that not all the websites that have this deployed V6 are participating in our events and in our deployments. They are doing that by themselves. Most probably they're looking at the websites of the IPv6 Forum or any vendor in this room or not attending. So we have something like 30 million hits on the website of the IPv6 Forum. And you can see that these companies, except maybe Sprint, all the others have V6. And the majority are in some sectors that need end-to-end, like gaming sectors or IPTV and the likes. So this is happening like the internet has been deployed. Everyone is doing it on his own, in his corner, and things are happening like this. So it will be the same format. But some core people have to make some of the things happen. Then the rest will be kind of a ripple effect on the other guys. Some of the new announcements which are quite key, like OVM, which has been kind of relaxed, if not opposed to IPv6, recently have warned the telecom world, and it is the prime consultant to the GSM Association, that they should move to V6. Okay, so really must prepare to V6. So this is even stronger than any RFC that we could put together. So that's very good. And then the business case we had, or the technical case of Comcast, now has been adopted by the Society of the Cable Telecommunication. So it's good to have success stories in order to have an impact on an entire industry. And then you have some new outfits that are coming up, to look at new things like cloud computing. You'll have Internet of Things and smart grid and so on. So I was very pleased to see Cyprian with some of the core people from the V6 Forum are creating their own companies, and I would encourage you to create startups, because that's the best thing that a community like you can do, or any university will promote startups, and V6 is a good place for this one. So we've been using these shacks, what I call Ned Checks, and they are going to be hit by the internet tornadoes. Just a few examples. So while V4 has given us the model to do email and web and so on and so forth. So the things that are going to happen, broadband, everyone talks about broadband, but having broadband without always-on IP addresses is just recreating the dial-up tone into something that's going to be there. IPTV, there are many cases in Asia where IPTV is used for IPv6 and voice over IP. Obviously, that's one of the low-cost technologies that can be used by the telecom operators in order to deploy voice in their core networks and later on to the outside. So you get things like peer-to-peer, ad hoc, LTE, 3G, Internet of Things, home networking, still to come, and internet transport or intelligent transport systems, car-to-car industry, and so on and so forth. And there are many things that are under discussions and research and negotiations. So yes, V6 will enable another 10 killer applications larger than the web itself, and that will happen. Especially we'll move from the internet as a communication tool into an internet as a real space internet. We'll be controlling devices, Internet of Things, controlling sectors like in the smart area, smart metering. So this is just going into this direction. There are tons of solutions happening today from a non-proprietary or proprietary solutions. And how can you scale them unless you do them through some kind of common, interoperable, and standardized protocol like IP, or in this case, IPv6. So you need to make these things happen. They're not going to come by themselves, and most probably it's the sectors that are trying to do that themselves. They need people that understand how to do that the proper way. Okay? So a message from our vice chair, or the honorary chairman, Windsurf, I want you to do V6. And in the end, I mean, I'm not trying to get a job here in the US, but it's really about job and wealth creation. So I have a little video for you that looks at 200 countries in 4 minutes and how the world has evolved from poorness into richness. And if the voice connection is working, you will have fun listening to this thing. Can we have get the voice on your side, my friend?
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only the UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, But there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China. I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Yes, pretty neat, sir. So, yeah, I guess this is our quest, and I would expect technology will play a great role in doing this. And it's in this spirit that I would like you to talk to each other and work with each other. And then we'll see, what the results are going to be until the next conference. Thank you very much.